In the crib, Caleb lay completely motionless. He was dead at only 19 days old. Hello and welcome to my channel. I hope you're doing great. This is the case of Kathleen Folbigg. At 2 AM on the 21st of February 1989, Craig Folbigg was awoken from sleep in his home in Newcastle, New South Wales suburb of Mayfield, Australia, by the sound of his wife, Kathleen, screaming. Rushing out of bed, he went into the adjoining sunroom and found Kathleen standing over their son Caleb's crib screaming, "My baby, something is wrong with my baby." In the crib, Caleb lay completely motionless. He was dead at only 19 days old. The death was attributed to sudden infant death syndrome, also known as SIDS or less formally as cot death. The following year, the couple had another baby, Patrick, on the 3rd of June 1990. For 3 months after the birth, Craig stayed home to help take care of Patrick and Kathleen. On the 18th of October that same year, Kathleen put Patrick to bed. Hours later, Craig was once again awoken by Kathleen screaming in the baby's room. Realising that Patrick wasn't breathing, Craig did his best to perform CPR. An ambulance was called and Patrick was taken to hospital. He survived but had suffered brain damage that left him with epilepsy and cortical blindness. The cause of his near death was unknown. 4 months later, on the 18th of February 1991, Craig received a phone call at work from Kathleen who said it's happened again. Patrick had died, seemingly as a result of seizures. Following Patrick's death, the Folbiggs moved to Thornton, New South Wales. While living there, Kathleen fell pregnant for a third time and on the 14th of October 1992 gave birth to a daughter, Sarah. Everything seemed to be as it should be until late August 1993 when Sarah caught a cold and was having trouble sleeping. At 1:30 AM on the 29th of August, Craig was once again awoken by his wife's screams, finding her standing in the doorway of their bedroom. Sarah was lying in bed, dead. The death was attributed to SIDS, even though the post-mortem found small abrasions near her mouth, along with petechial hemorrhage, oedema and minor congestion in the lungs, all of which made the death more suspicious, as they would all be consistent with death by asphyxiation via the application of mild force. After Sarah's death, the couple relocated again, this time to Singleton in Hunter Valley, New South Wales. They'd lived there for 2 years when in 1996 Kathleen became pregnant for a 4th time. A second daughter, Laura, was born on the 7th of August 1997. Given the family's history, unlike her deceased siblings, Laura's breathing and sleep patterns were closely monitored for several weeks after her birth to be on the safe side as she was apparently healthy. 19 months later, Laura caught a cold. Kathleen gave her medicine, but at 12:05 PM on the 1st of March 1999, she called an ambulance after Laura stopped breathing. According to the official report, paramedics arrived to find Kathleen performing CPR on her daughter on the breakfast bar. They examined Laura and found that she was not breathing and had no pulse. Unlike the previous deaths, Laura's death wasn't ruled to be SIDS, as the coroner considered her to be too old for it to be the case. Instead, the cause of death was recorded as undetermined, and a police investigation was ordered. The case was given to Detective Sergeant Bernard Ryan. He began his investigation by interviewing the Folbiggs, and upon learning that Laura was the 4th child of theirs to die in the same circumstances, his suspicions grew. Then the case took an unexpected turn. After Laura's death, Kathleen had left Craig and hadn't taken many of her possessions along with her after moving out. Among those possessions that she left was some diaries, which Craig found and read. He later testified in court that what he read made him want to vomit. He took them to the police. Kathleen Diary's entries reveal a woman full of contradictory thoughts and feelings. On one hand, she desperately wanted to be a mother to prove she could do it just like other women could. But on the other, she wrote about the frustrations of motherhood and her feelings of resentment after each birth when attention shifted from her to the baby, describing it as a feeling of abandonment. She also wrote about how stress made her do terrible things and how she felt flashes of rage, resentment and hatred towards her children, along with entries specifically regarding her treatment of her children. I feel like the worst mother on this earth, scared that she, referring to Laura, will leave me now like Sarah did. I know I was short-tempered and cruel sometimes to her, and she left with a bit of help. Kathleen's unbalanced state of mind can perhaps be partly explained by her background. Born on the 14th of June 1967, her father Thomas Britton murdered her mother by stabbing her 24 times on Sunday in early December 1968, allegedly because he was furious over her neglect of the then 18-month-old Kathleen. A witness later testified in court that after committing the murder, Thomas had knelt down and kissed Kathleen, saying, "I'm sorry, darling, I had to do it." He then turned to the witness and said, "I had to kill her because she'd kill my child." Thomas was sent to prison, serving 15 years before being released and deported back to the UK. Kathleen grew up in care and left school at 15. She married Craig Folbigg 5 years later in 1987. On the 14th of October 1996, after 3 of her children had already died, Kathleen made a diary entry referencing her early childhood and how it had affected her. "Obviously, I am my father's daughter." The case against Kathleen took 2 years to assemble, and on the 19th of April 2002, she was arrested at her home and charged with the murders of all 4 of her children. During her bail hearing, a Maitland local court police prosecutor, Daniel Maher, told the court that the prosecution would show evidence from Kathleen's diaries along with testimony from Craig Folbigg and technical evidence from expert witnesses. He also said that the circumstances surrounding the deaths were not consistent with sudden infant death, syndrome or cot death. The circumstances in question included the fact that each child was found face up. They were still warm when they were found, and in 2 cases there were signs of life. He went on to state that the chances of cot death being responsible were 1,000,000,000 to 1, and that extensive tests had ruled out the possibility that the children suffered from fatal genetic or viral disorders. At the end of the hearing, Magistrate Richard Wakely refused bail and ordered that Kathleen remain in custody while awaiting trial. During the trial at the Darlinghurst Supreme Court in Sydney, the prosecution presented evidence portraying Kathleen as someone who was preoccupied with her own life and looks, more interested in going out to the gym and nightclubs than looking after her own children. They also asserted that she had a low stress threshold and killed her children by smothering them because she couldn't cope with the day-to-day responsibilities of motherhood. Additionally, the court heard that the chances of Laura dying from SIDS were extremely low because during her life she was exhaustively investigated, monitored and had lived beyond the IDS danger period. According to expert witness Dr. Christopher Seaton, the head of the Sleeping Investigation Unit at Sydney's Westmead Children's Hospital, the chances of Laura dying from SIDS was infinitely perhaps less than average, which is 1 in 1,000. The defence made the case that Kathleen didn't harm her children and that she didn't think that Craig was responsible either. They stuck with the explanation that the deaths were results of SIDS and that in Laura's case myocarditis, a claim which the prosecution countered with the testimony of forensic pathologist Professor Roger Bayard, who stated that only 1 child per year in Australia ever died from myocarditis. Professor Bayard also stated that there was nothing in the pathology to show Patrick died of epilepsy. The defence presented Kathleen as a caring mother, having acquaintances of hers give testimony about her caring nature and pointing to journal entries that demonstrated the care and concern she gave her children. Regarding the more alarming entries, they stated that there were no direct admissions of guilt and that those indirectly suggesting it could be attributed to normal guilt of a grieving mother. During the trial, Kathleen remained calm and collected until the 4th week when she broke down crying as a recording of her 1999 police interview was played and she tried to run out the courtroom. She was restrained by court staff, taken to a nearby hospital and sedated. The incident put the trial on hold for several days while Kathleen recovered. When it was resumed, Craig Folbigg was called to give evidence. In his testimony, he described the terrifying growl that Kathleen would produce when she got frustrated with the children, and how she pinned Laura to her high chair and attempted to force feed her before dumping her on the floor with the words, "Go to your fucking father," several hours before Laura's death. 2 months after the trial began, the jury found Kathleen Folbigg guilty of 3 counts of murder, 1 count of manslaughter, and 1 count of maliciously inflicted grievous bodily harm. The following August, she was sentenced to 40 years in prison with a non-parole period of 30 years. Interviewed outside the courtroom, Craig dissolved into tears as he told reporters, "My humble thanks go to the 12 people who I have never formally met, who today share the honour of having set 4 beautiful souls free to rest in peace finally." Several weeks after the trial, Folbigg wrote a scathing letter to the Sydney Morning Herald expressing her anger at the decision, calling the case against her a totally circumstantial, non-factual hearsay case, and blaming Craig for betraying her by turning simple into exaggerated and extravagant tales. While many convicted murderers maintain their innocence, Kathleen remains to have had more people willing to listen to her than most. In 2005, an appeal resulted in the reduction of her sentence to 30 years in prison with a non-parole period of 25 years. On the 22nd of August 2018, New South Wales Attorney General Mark Speakman announced there would be an inquiry into the convictions to ensure the public confidence in the administration of justice. This was in response to her petition presented by her supporters, which he said appears to raise a doubt or question concerning the evidence as to the incidents and reported deaths of 3 or more infants in the same family attributed to unidentified natural causes in the proceedings leading to Miss Folbigg's convictions. However, in 2019, a former chief judge of the district court found he did not have any reasonable doubt as to the guilt of Kathleen Megan Folbigg for the offences of which she was convicted. On the 4th of March 2021, another petition signed by more than 100 eminent scientists was published by the Australian Academy of Science, calling for the NSW governor to pardon Folbigg, including scientific and medical explanations for each of the deaths. This was likely in response to new genetic evidence found in 2020 that showed that at least 2 of the children had genetic mutations that predisposed them to sudden cardiac death, and the other 2 carried 2 potentially lethal genetic mutations in the gene BSN, Basum presynaptic cytomatrix protein, which is linked to early onset lethal epilepsy in mice, with 1 mutation inherited from their mother and the second one likely inherited from their father, Craig. However, it should be noted that this is far from conclusive, findings in mice not always being applicable to humans and predisposition not being a certainty. Kathleen is currently held at Clarence Correctional Centre in New South Wales. Given the nature of her crimes, Kathleen is held in protective custody to protect her from being attacked by the other inmates. Nevertheless, she suffered a beating at the hands of another inmate on the 1st of January 2021 after a prison transfer. So that was the case of Kathleen Folbigg, a woman who never should have been able to take the lives of all 4 of her children. And I definitely feel there were some failures by the medical professionals, police, and her own husband to see what was actually going on. I think if she hadn't have been caught and locked up, it's a pattern of behaviour that probably would have continued. Please let me know your thoughts about this case, whether you think she did it or if there was some medical reason for all 4 of these deaths. I'll be very interested to hear what you have to say. But until I see you again, please be safe, be well, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.